do some outreach. Before we get going, I just really want to recognize some of the faces that are here. Thank you, Mike Ramsey, for being here. We really appreciate having our district attorney here. Thank you. We have our county supervisor, Doug Teeter. Thank you so much for being here. We have representatives from PG&E who we really appreciate being here as well as we come up for creative solutions. And we have the environmental director for the Mechoopda tribe, Hilo Ramirez. Really big round of applause for Hilo. I also really want to recognize a lot of the younger faces that I'm seeing. I know that me growing up in this neighborhood, growing up out here in the canyon, I have been very privileged to bear witness to so many of our elders advocating for this creek, advocating for this watershed and the salmon my entire life. And I'm at a place in my life right now where I really get to step up in my own advocacy. And we have such a wealth of information in the people who have been doing really great work over the course of the past several decades. So thank you all so much for being here. Thank you to the young folks. Quick show of hands, who is pretty angry and upset about what happened to our creek on August 10th? Great. So now we got that out of our system, right? I really want to set the boundary that this is not a platform or a space where we're here to air our frustrations, to be angry, to finger point. We are here to come together and generate creative solutions for a path forward for how we can best steward this watershed. And that's going to require all of us, all hands on deck. So we're really gonna hold that boundary really firm, that we're not up here just to like spew and be angry and upset, okay? Thank you. Furthermore, kind of on that, that same line is a lot of times partisan politics can be dragged into discussions like this. We're setting a firm boundary that this is a nonpartisan space. There will be other discussions in which partisan politics are really relevant. In this space, we don't want to risk alienating potential allies just on the basis of partisan politics. So if you do get a chance to share during the Q&A, we really ask that that boundary be held firm. So we will have a Q&A section at the end of the presenters. We have 3 presenters. You should all have a outline showing the agenda for us to move forward. We will have Hilo kicking it off, giving a presentation on environmental perspective from the Mechoopda tribe, which we really feel is going to set a firm foundation for us to move forward in land stewardship. And I know we're all eager to learn, so we're really grateful there. We have a short presentation from Blissa Nizzoli and Phaedra Laraca Moral, who will be talking about conscious roadway management. And now I know we're all here to discuss the flume failure that happened, but overall, this is a discussion of how we can best care for our watershed. And the topics that they present are very, very relevant. So I hope that you all give them your best attention in there. We have Jared McCord is going to be doing a presentation on what he witnessed when he went up and visited the site of the flume failure. So I know that a lot of us, myself included, spent a lot of time wondering, well, what actually happened? What did it look like? So we've got some great visuals there to share with folks. And then after that, we have the wonderful Alan Hawthorne, the executive director of Friends of Butte Creek, who has a fantastic presentation for us on a very tangible pathway forward for how we as a community can advocate for this watershed, actions we can take, and a potential roadmap that I think you guys will all find really interesting. After that has all happened, we will have an open Q&A section. We ask that everyone that wants to speak, please sign up in advance. We have a sign-up sheet outside at the front table, and we will be keeping everybody's section very short just to make sure that everybody has time to speak. So thank you all so much for being here. I'm going to pass it off to Hilo or to Blissa and then to Hilo, and I'm so excited to learn with everyone.
Welcome, Hilo Ramirez. Is that your last name? From the Mechoopda tribe, coming up. I'll help you with this part.
Thanks.
Here, let me help you.
Maybe you can just have it on one ear and let the other side drop.
There, think we can make it bigger.
There we go. Yeah,
You
that'll
got
work.
the other ear? The other ear. You're gonna be up there a while. There you go. All right. Is that close enough?
Yeah, can everyone hear me? Okay, it'll work. Itanayam, Nikiyam sa hilo niki ma'a machopto, machopto ni tawal Nikiyam, environmental director. Greetings, y'all. My name's Hilo. I'm Machupta, and I work for the Machupta tribe as the environmental director. And I'm here to talk about the tribe's environmental perspective on this incident, but also just on the watershed management as a whole. So the Machupta tribe, as the traditional peoples of Big Chico Creek watershed and the Butte Creek watershed, we have a heavy interest in the restoration of our traditional territory. We're a people of salmon and acorns. Salmon are the lifeblood of who we are as a people. And our one goal within our traditional territory, one primary goal, is the restoration of free wild salmon throughout both Big Chico Creek and Butte Creek. Now, we have the largest spring run wild salmon run in the entire state of California within Butte Creek. However, with climate change, there will be hotter, drier temperatures, and the lower watershed will be less and less habitable for salmon. The clear solution to that is opening access to the upper watershed. However, the PG&E de Sabla project prevents them from reaching their upper watershed past Quartz Bowl. From a purely logistical standpoint, we are currently working on salmon restoration projects on Big Chico Creek, and we look forward to salmon restoration projects on Butte Creek. If PG&E, so a little bit of backstory. In 2009, PG&E's FERC license expired. Since 2009, PG&E has been running off an annual FERC license. 2017, PG&E had notified FERC that it was not interested in renewing its license, at which point FERC set out Federal Energy Regulation Commission. It's the federal government agency that's responsible for regulating power utilities that do energy projects. Sorry for that. So in 2017, PG&E had made it known to FERC that they were not interested in updating their license, 30, 40, 50-year license. And I have a quote that I would much rather read from so I get the wording correct here. So if you humor me for 1 second. Apologies. I'm not good on the spot. However, to paraphrase, FERC, PG&E had replied to FERC and said that it was intending to withdraw from the DeSabla Powerhouse project, and that was due to it did not make sense to the ratepayers since the DeSabla project does not produce hydroelectric electricity on a profitable scale, and the conditions with a new FERC license would make that even less profitable. At which point, FERC looked for a different licensee to take over the project, which did not happen in 2019. So today we're back at square one with annual licenses for the FERC license for the DeSabla project. And from my standpoint, I see a lot of money coming from NOAA and other state and federal agencies for specifically salmon passage habitat restoration. So if there is a way to constructively work with community partners, private corporations, and the tribe and all these other players to find funding to remedy that issue of fish passage through the DeSabla Powerhouse project, I believe that would be crucial, and I believe we can do it together.
Thank you so much, Hilo. We really appreciate your perspective and working with you further. Yeah, beautiful. Phaedra? Phaedra and I are going to present some conscious road management. Phaedra is going to present first.
Hi, I'm Phaedra LaRocca Morrill. As spoken earlier, we are here majority for the canal breach. However, the residents here in Butte Creek Canyon have seen some not so favorable actions that are being taken on our roadsides and with our roads. So I'm going to make it really brief and just kind of bring it forth for Teeter to listen to bring back to the county council so that we can get some action here on our roads. Slide. Oh, and by the way, there is a lot of jargon up there that is big words and organizations and stuff like that. So please just take a picture of it because I'm going to kind of paraphrase it all really quickly just to move things along. But you're welcome to take a picture of the slide and go to the resources where I found the data and stuff like that. Okay. Slide, sorry. We all know it. I'm going to talk about the asphalt portion of the road. We all pretty much know what asphalt is. Since the campfire, they've repaired our roads 3 times. For those that have lived here prior to the campfire, you know that all of the heavy equipment that was coming in and out, debris removal, homes rebuilding, wells being dug, all of that damaged the road tremendously. Giant divots in the concrete or the pavement and just terrible stuff. So they've come in and kind of patched the road. We do have state and federal funding to repair it properly, but they continue to just kind of patch it. Why does this affect the canyon? Slide. This is a picture of the rain that we got in August. Asphalt has contaminants, of course. There's lots of contaminants. When you apply it, the most toxic part of it is that first rain runoff. And that's why I took a picture of there. This is right, the creek is like right here, right where the people stop and pull over and swim. I'm sure all of you guys noticed the repair on the way up. I mean, is it better? Sure. Is it great? No. It still is bumpy and very unacceptable, I think. Next slide. Okay, this is where it gets really a lot of information from the EPA. So the EPA basically did a study, and you can check out the study yourself. And they basically found that the initial wetting after sealing may be the most crucial flush of PAHs into the environment. Polycyclical aromatic hydrocarbons. You can study that too. So is this good for the salmon? Absolutely not. There's parts of the road that are being repaired that is like right on the creek side. You could see pictures or you can get out and see it crumbling into the creek essentially. Next slide. Nope, it didn't make it on. Yeah, and the other part is a 6-ppd, which is an element on your tire. It prevents it from cracking and gives you longer life of your tire. Essentially, the 6-ppd rubs off and converts to 6-ppdq. Again, please take a picture of the links and you guys can do your study on it. Basically, the reason why I have this up here is when you have crappy roads and we're bumping like this, it's releasing more tire particles, which is releasing more 6-ppdq into the river, into the creek, which is actually detrimental, known to the watershed and specifically to salmon. So again, if we do the road properly the first time and do it right, we can eliminate the PAHs and the 6-ppdqs. And I think there are many of us here that live on Honey Run and Centerville know that you can buy 30,000 mile tires and you're only going to get 15,000 out of them because the road is not acceptable. Okay, but I think that might be the last slide. Oh, what can we do about it? Can we do better? Of course we can do better, right? Right? We could do better. We all live in Butte Creek Canyon because we love it. This is a sacred, sacred part of California. And we do deserve a little extra love and care because we have the only salmon run. We have a healthy creek. We have a salmon run. The county needs to look at what they're doing here as a little bit extra special than what you would do in other environmental locations, because we do have the last native run of salmon. So please speak out, sign up, sign petition, get involved. Melissa?
Phaedra.
Next.
Thank you, Phaedra. So the weeds, did anybody notice when they were driving down the road that there's sort of this swath of death that goes all the way up and down? It actually goes all the way up Centerville Road, almost like 100 feet before you get to Nimshu. Goes all the way up Honey Run, and it goes all the way up Helltown. So I don't even know what it is. We have letters in asking to find out what it is. But at this point, it doesn't really look like it's glyphosate. It looks like it could be 2,4-D. We'll find out more. But the foliage is dead, standing, right? And this is not creating a greater aesthetic, and it is certainly not safe as far as fires go. We're actually created a situation where it is more flammable all along our roadside. So, and we see that has been sprayed. In some places, I was noticing it's much higher than 10 feet. It is very high. And it also reaches, in some places, sensitive places, way into the forest on the other side of the roadway. So this is unacceptable. We have, again, we have year-round springs and small creeks that are being sprayed. They were sprayed this year, right along the roadside. As you can see in this photo, it's not a great photo, but you can see this is a spring, and everything here is dead. It's also quite a bit taller. I'm about 6 feet tall. This is quite a bit taller than me. So that creates concerns about wildlife. They're drinking this water. This water it feeds all of the frogs and all of the little life forms that create this vibrant ecosystem. And then it runs down into the creek, where our sensitive salmon are struggling already, as we know, and now have just received quite the blow with this silt and dirt coming into the creek. So next, please. Here are a couple pictures that I took 2 days ago. And you can see right here, this is just down the road, very high, it's dead. This is dead. All along here, this is a year-round little creek or spring. I think it's a creek. It's sprayed into it the whole way. Here is near our sacred, beautiful oak trees that are up the road, grandmother, grandfather trees. These fig trees are sprayed dead. Like, how does that, the point is made. Let's go to the next slide. So this is where we're going to focus, is strategies, actions. What can we do? The first thing, we're going to hand around a petition. And this petition is so that we can get in and we can have a hearing with the supervisors, county supervisors. So we'd love to not only have you sign that petition, but show up at the meeting that we're sure to be awarded. This is a situation where common sense practices can be taken into account. We need mechanized weed abatement, mowing, mulching. There's also other practices that are being used in Northern California. The Fire Safe Council is using goats There are creative ways that we can address this situation. If it means we have somebody, a couple of guys with weed whackers, there's so many ways that we can look at this. The way it's happening now, it's unacceptable. So there's a study, here's the reference, that shows that mulch has worked very well in a first-year application and acceptably well in a second-year application. That second year, it also received clove oil. So clove oil, I don't know what kind of environmental impact that has, but we know it does come from a plant. It should be something to be considered. And then mulch, which is expensive, is everywhere. Almost every time I drive down the road, I see a branch or a tree down or new vegetation that could be created as mulch. And then if we looked at the long term, besides having the county clean up the mess that's out there right now that is creating a significant fire danger, we'd also like to propose a ban of herbicides being used on the roadside here. And that's the way that we're looking for strategies for better treatment, better stewardship of this land. It's very sacred. I love that you have a question, but we're going to go ahead and wait till the end. Oh, the vines out there. Yeah, there's a lot of ways that this can be addressed. And from what I can see, it looks to me like the only one really profiting here is the chemical company that sold the chemicals. And that's not acceptable. So without further ado, Jared McCord is going to bring a site report from the flume rake.
I can hold
Put it
it.
in your pocket.
All right, can everybody hear me? Said I got 7 minutes, so I better be quick, right? So I want to thank everybody for being here. I appreciate everybody showing up for themselves and making a difference. I'm glad that we have a big turnaround, and it means a lot to me. I'm a longtime Canyon resident. I've been here, well, I'm going to be 49 this year. And my great-grandparents and my grandparents and my mother and us, and now I'm going to be a grandfather, and my daughter's going to have a baby, so 6 generations. Thank you very much. I want to thank Alan and Pamela for their 20-plus years of devotion to the creek, and I really appreciate you guys very much. And Phaedra and Alyssa and Kara, and if anybody I'm forgetting, Andrew for putting all this together, and Gary for taking pictures. So on the 10th, I woke up. I usually go outside and do some meditation and exercise and sit by the creek. And I walked outside and something didn't feel right. And I was like, what is going on out here? So I looked down the creek and it's basically orange, which was like, what? Am I having a dream? Did I actually wake up this morning? That was super concerning to me. I immediately reached out to Alan. One of the things that was really concerning to me is there's nothing from the county, nothing in the news saying that the water is even safe to get into. That was a big deal for me because we have a lot of people, the weather was super hot. People are coming up from Chico to swim. They're swimming in the water. We didn't even know if it was a chemical spill or whatever happened because we got Upper Butte Meadows. We have a lot of things above us that, could be concerning. So with the creek being orange, and nobody knowing anything that's going on, that was a concern. So I took it upon myself finally, after a lot of stories and, people communicating and saying a lot of things that we had no idea what was happening. So me and Bliss ended up hiking up and doing some videos and doing some pictures and actually seeing what happened, which made me feel better because I knew it wasn't toxic and I knew that it was really a serious problem, but at least it wasn't anything but natural mud and debris and stuff. So with all that said, we're gonna do a video that Zeke put together and Alan and everybody edited that will show the site, give you guys an actual clear view of what happened so that we can, find some solutions and move forward with this. Thank you.
And then you can see like it washed away. Like my kid's standing out there and he's like almost 6 feet tall. So you can see that it washed away like 12-foot tall berm of dirt. And it just keeps going as we look downhill here. Like it gets deeper and deeper, and there's all these trees that have fallen over from the kind of landslide that was created. So you can just see how this enormous slurry of clay and mud made its way down. You can hear Butte Creek at the bottom here. It's not that far. So yeah, it's what happens when you put millions of gallons of water on super steep slopes with deep soils.
Today we're talking about one of PG&E's hydropower flumes in Butte Creek Canyon. It sprung a big leak last week, and all that water caused a landslide, and this massive kind of slump of mud and dirt and rocks went down about 1,500 feet down the mountain into Butte Creek, and it created a dam that backed up Butte Creek. And then eventually the creek kind of blew out that dam, and we got this big slug of kind of orange sediment that's been filling up the creek for the last 4 or 5 days. So there's some worry about that because the creek's got a wild Chinook salmon run in it, of fish that come up from the Pacific every year. And right now there's about 500 fish downstream of the blowout that are kind of waiting through this time of year until they spawn in the fall. And so there's concern that those fish are going to die, and there's also concern that all this muck in the creek is going to make it hard for the salmon to spawn later this year in the fall. So Upper Butte Creek is an interesting place for a few different reasons. One of them is because we've got one of the only wild Chinook salmon runs in the state. When they put in the dams at Orville and Shasta, they blocked off the upper Sacramento and the Feather River watersheds. They blocked off thousands of miles of fish habitat. So really the only places we still have wild Chinook salmon in the interior of California in the Central Valley are between Orville at Orville Dam and Redding at Shasta Dam. But everything else is pretty much blocked off behind these giant dams, or just by other dams on tributaries like the Stony Creek or the Yuba River. Butte Creek got mined heavily in the 1850s, including hydraulic mining. And that means they washed the mountains down and they sluiced the gold. And one of the ways that they were able to do that was by using these canals that diverted water from Butte Creek up onto the hill over a course of 9 or 10 miles. And once hydraulic mining was banned, they figured out, hey, there's just when hydropower starting to get a hold, over 100 years ago. Like, hey, we got water rights and a canal already built. And so the powerhouses on Butte Creek were some of the first hydroelectric development on the West Coast. So that's just all to say that there's kind of this pretty crazy backstory as to why these canals exist in the first place. So just to give a little regional context on where this is happening, we're about 1.5 miles above Forks of Butte and Garland Road, and you're looking out over Magalia and Paradise and Chico and Forest Ranch down Butte Creek Canyon. This canal, a lot of it is dug into the hill, and then there's places where it's on elevated kind of flumes made out of steel. In the past, they're made out of wood. And so a lot of that old ditch is just places where they dug out a ditch and they stacked up a bunch of rocks basically built a rock wall. And so this ditch is just, in some places the bottom is lined with gunite, which is sprayed concrete. In other places it's just a natural bedrock that they dug down to. The bottom of the flume kind of was leaking under the gunite sidewall, and it just kind of created a big hole and sucked out. It made itself bigger and bigger, and then you had this gushing of water, and so it looked like it was running about 40 CFS, which is about 1 million gallons an hour, and that all dumped straight down into Butte Creek, and it created this new kind of giant gully that it's pretty huge. There's about 1,500 feet or so from the blowout down to Butte Creek, but it drops, I don't know, like 500 feet. So just to take it back to the fish real quick, one thing that's interesting here is that salmon don't make it up this far. And there's a lot of trout in this section, and down here's Forks of Butte where you can drive in a passenger car. But the salmon currently, they only make it up to here about to DeSabla, and then there's the Centerville Head Dam is actually a barrier to fish passage. But even below that, there's some waterfalls that make it pretty hard for salmon to get up that far. The water that's being diverted from Butte Creek into this canal comes back into the creek. It's 1 million gallons an hour that aren't going down the creek itself, which would be great if it was in the creek for trout. The thing that's harder on the salmon is that once that water goes through DeSabla, it gets diverted again into the lower Centerville Canal. And right now, lower Centerville isn't happening because of maintenance issues. But that diversion is a problem because when it's really hot out, this water that's coming out of DeSabla is cold. And the water that's in the flume is cold too. It kind of stays in the shade. But this water that goes down the creek is exposed to just a lot of sun in the bedrock sections of the canyon. And so this water gets hot. Warm water can't hold as much oxygen, and when the water's too warm, fish die. And so one of the things that's been happening, local conservation organizations are trying to secure water rights to have more water in Butte Creek for the fish. PG&E was trying to sell their projects here, the lower Centerville and DeSabla powerhouses. And right now they're not on the market. But it kind of begs the question, these projects both have really deteriorating infrastructure. They're both over 100 years old. Who would want to buy this when the liability is that if your ditch blows out, you're going to send a bunch of mud down the hill and potentially decimate one of the only wild salmon runs left on the West Coast? One of the conversations that's happening is that this project is worth negative money, right? It's like, who wants to give PG&E money for a broken project? This project is a liability. I think ideally we get these canals taken out, and all that water that's currently going through canals actually runs in Butte Creek and helps us have our salmon not go extinct. So all of the stuff that's happening with the blowout is happening in this larger kind of political context of PG&E's bankruptcy, PG&E's liability for things like the Camp Fire, which just happened right over the hill here, California's desire to decarbonize, and therefore seeing hydropower as a special kind of energy that's cleaner than coal or natural gas. That's pretty complicated, but I think the thing that is clear is that dumping millions of pounds of mud onto a salmon run that's on the brink anyway, that's not good with anyone, and we just can't keep having this happen.
Yeah, we want to thank Zeke for that great video. He couldn't attend today, but he did a really good job. Now we see what has happened, what the little bit of history of the canyon, and now we're going to talk about solutions. Alan's got great path forward, and I look forward to hearing what he has to say.
The man who needs no introduction, I guess. Alan Hawthorne.
Now, the official way I introduce myself is Alan Hawthorne, Allenharthorn. Otherwise, somebody will misspell it. So I just want to say that I really wasn't planning on being here tonight 2 weeks ago. I'm sure none of you were probably even thinking about this even a week ago. I was supposed to be a pool boy today at a pool party, but instead we're here. I'm actually really glad to see this gathering. I want to give a special thanks to Phaedra and Kara and Blissa and Jared and Andrew, Nolan and Lola, all the young people that have really stepped up and kind of pushed me away from my pool party to come up here and talk to you tonight. So this is a presentation I've been giving for about 8 years now. It's evolved quite a bit over the years, and I've updated it for this particular town hall meeting today. And it was always, the salmon want to know what's going to happen here. We've been waiting a long time for this, but now it's become very clear that we all want to know too. It's been 14 years since the licensing process ended for the public. We didn't have any meetings after 2009. So it's been really hard to figure out what's going on. Things like the sale of the project pop up out of nowhere, and we're still struggling to figure it all out. So we actually formed a group, and I'll tell you about it in a minute, and we started talking about some solutions that we could propose to PG&E. So we'll go to the next slide here. This is just an overview of Butte Creek, just for those who aren't fully aware of all that it entails. Butte Meadows is up here in what I call the little mushroom cap of Butte Creek. There's about 5 or 6 tributaries that come into Butte Creek up in the Meadows area, Jonesville area. And then it comes down into the canyon where it's a very steep, very narrow canyon. You can see the watershed boundaries here. It's probably less than 5 miles wide in many places. So a couple tributaries along this side, then a big tributary over here, west branch of Butte Creek and Berry Creek, which form the forks of the Butte, on downstream to the Centerville Head Dam, down to the covered bridge where Little Butte Creek enters the creek, and then out into the valley, down to Colusa, which is where the natural outflow of Butte Creek used to be. It's called the Butte Slough Outfall Gates now. It's not a stream, it's a gate. And what happens, next slide, is that the water is backed up at the outfall gates, allowed to rise up enough to where it spills into the Sutter bypass. This is a flood control bypass that protects Colusa, offers a little bit of flood protection for the Sacramento area as well. But Butte Creek, through the Sutter bypass, actually passes through 2 separate channels, the East Barrow and the West Barrow. When it gets down close to the Sacramento River, this is Willow Slough right here. The creek all goes over to one side here and on down about another 5 miles. And finally, it comes into the Sacramento River. This is the Feather River, this is the Sacramento River, and you would hardly believe that there's a little creek here that so many salmon recognize and come up every year. This little tiny thread right here in the middle of these 2 giant rivers is how the fish get into this creek and come all the way up here. It's an absolute miracle. When I saw this picture, I was just stunned that they continue to come back. Next slide. We also have a little extension on Butte Creek. It's called the West Branch of Feather River. So there are 2 reservoirs that PG&E owns, Round Valley Reservoir, Philbrook Reservoir. They drain into the West Branch and on down here, where just outside of this picture, they come to the Hendricks Head Dam, which diverts water across the ridge through the Hendricks and then the Toadtown Canal and into DeSable Reservoir. Next. So I want to just give you a quick little overview of the last, 65 years of salmon populations. And this is one of the few places where we have this kind of information, because the Department of Fish and Game, now the Department of Fish and Wildlife, has been doing these snorkel surveys forever, since the 50s. And amazingly, back in the 50s, when we had fishing open on Butte Creek, we still had some pretty good runs. I mean, there's one over 5,000 fish. And those are the fish that got by all the dams, all the diversions, all the anglers, and made it back up into the canyon here. So pretty impressive stuff. And right in here, rather large drop in populations. And it just so happened to coincide with the initiation of the California Water Project. When they started operating the State Water Project, they were pumping water out of the Delta to beat the band all spring long, to send the water down to San Joaquin and on down to LA and beyond. What they didn't realize is that all the juvenile spring run salmon were migrating down through the Delta at that time. So for many, many years, thousands of juvenile fish were being ground up at the pumps down there. The agencies have realized that, and they've changed their practices. They really do a much better job of protecting the out-migrating juveniles. And then there are other aspects that have helped this run here. Notice a slight increase in population in the 80s, a couple runs here that bumped up to 1,000 fish. It was in part because FERC required PG&E to release more water above the Centerville powerhouse. Prior to 1980, when this project was last relicensed, the minimum midstream flow above the powerhouse here was 10 CFS. And those of you who can remember back then know that the pools were not connected. It was just one pool that would go underground, then it would come back up. So fish didn't get up there. In fact, they put a dam or a block up down here at the Centerville Head Dam to keep the fish from going up. So recognizing the value of that habitat, the flow was increased to 20 CFS in the 80s. We had a little bit of a response. Here we had a little bit of a problem, temperature problem. But then in 1992, PG&E was going to rebuild the Centerville powerhouse. That required that they open their FERC license, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And at that point, the agency stepped in and said, we need a temperature study of this upper section above the Centerville powerhouse to understand what's best for the fish. And to do that temperature study, you need to release 40 CFS per second. So ultimately, starting in 1992, which is right about there, the fish up above the powerhouse had 40 CFS where they used to have 10. All of a sudden, they had conditions like they'd never had before. And one thing about the spring run, when they leave the ocean, they stop eating. So they've got a lot of fat reserves, which is one of the reasons they are such an important species for the Native Americans, the indigenous people of California and the Pacific Northwest. So they're living off that fat reserve all summer long. And it's stressful no matter what. But when the water's hot, when the flows are low, it makes it so that the females can't even lay viable eggs. So back in these years here, it was tough altogether for them. But once that flow bumped up, the first return of fish after that 1992 flow increase went from 750 fish to 7,500, a tenfold increase, which in the fisheries world is pretty unprecedented. It doesn't happen very often. Meanwhile, 3 years later, look what happened. So this is our kind of our high time here. We were rolling along with salmon, 5,000 to 8,000 fish a year. Then had a little bit of a drought, another big drought here. We had a fire in here. And then amazingly, we had this incredible run come back in 2021. Those were the offspring from the campfire year. They were born in 2018, right when the fire happened. They were in the gravel when the fire blew over, when the mud came running down. Somehow they came back, once again, 10 times as many as the parent population. But we had a hot summer. And as Jared was mentioning, temperature is a real issue here. And this is what happened. Out of over 20, this graph I haven't adjusted for the correct numbers, but there was over 21,000 fish that came back, and 19,000 of those fish died before they spawned. So a real tragedy, and one that is very hard to do anything about. It's really hard to make the water colder. It's not just an easy thing to do. Next slide. So this is the PG&E operation, West Branch, Feather River, Round Valley, Philbrook, Hendricks Head Dam, and the Toadtown Powerhouse, which is on the canal going over to Butte Creek. And on Butte Creek, we've got the head dam. We've got the flumes coming down. This is actually the forks of the Butte Powerhouse, which I'll mention briefly. and then the DeSable Powerhouse, Centerville Head Dam, and finally the Centerville Powerhouse down at the bottom. And I'll give you a little bit more detail of that in a minute. Next slide. So as Jared was mentioning, this project's been in operation for over 100 years now. This was the 5th Francis turbine installed on the Pacific coast and the first high head turbine. So this project right here really set the stage for hydroelectric development along the West Coast, and it's famous for that. Everybody knows this is a famous place. The DeSable Powerhouse came along a couple years later. You can see it's sitting down there on the edge of the creek. And also there's a caretaker's house up there because all of these things required full-time caretakers, you know, usually 2 or 3 people to take care of them. So they had a nice big fancy house up there. Next. So over on the west branch of the Feather River, that water coming out of Philbrook and Round Valley is diverted here at the Hendricks Head Dam, which is one of the things that the agencies would like to see PG&E rebuild, but we'll see how that goes. Next slide. Now up in Upper Butte Creek, this is Butte Head Dam at 2,900 feet, no longer any water holding capacity in here. It's completely filled with sediment. The diversion into the canal is right below these folks that are standing on the edge here. Next slide. And that's about 50 feet high. It supposedly used to have a fish ladder on there, according to some of the old time Fish and Game people. Next slide. Immediately downstream, the dam is on the other side of these rocks here. The canal comes through the rocks. This is where they release water back into the creek for what's called the minimum in-stream flow for the fish downstream of the dam. And in a normal year, it's 15 cubic feet per second. In a dry year, 7.5 CFS. Next slide. Canal continues on down, and you can see how this thing is just hanging on the edge all the way down. It's well built. I mean, no question about it. Much better than it used to be. We'll see that in a minute. Next slide. On downstream, it's Centerville Head Dam. Once again, the dam is pretty full of sediment and other debris. Water is not flowing over the dam because it was a low water year. All the water goes into the canal and then released at a point downstream, once again for that minimum in-stream flow, which comes down through this section here. And it's 40 CFS now. Next slide. This is what Centerville Head Dam looked like when they first built it. Wooden structure, pretty funky stuff, but it worked, and they were able to, you know, do their hydraulic mining and the initial hydroelectric production. Next. This is what the flume used to look like. I mean, you can see how well built that metal part is, but this is what it used to look like. And you can imagine there's a leak right there. But this thing probably failed like every year in one place or another. Next slide. And this is, you know, just another shot downstream. People hiking along here. It's a very enjoyable hike. Great to get up into this part of the canyon, which otherwise you would never be able to get to. Next slide. So the Centerville Canal has been out of use for 10 years now. This is what it looked like quite a few years ago. I think it was before 2017, but you know, you can see the gunite walls on either side, the gravel bottom here. This was always a pretty good canal. We used to tube down it all the time. It was a great thing. This is what it looks like today. After the fire, we've got dead trees everywhere. They're all fallen in. A couple places they've fallen right on the metal structures here. It's in a sad state of disrepair. The only saving grace is we have some wild sweet peas here, although this is a non-native broom there that we really should get rid of. Next slide. And finally, this Centerville Powerhouse at 520 feet. So at Hendricks Head Dam, we started at 3,200 feet. The project goes all the way down to the outfall of Centerville here at 520 feet. Next slide. So this is just kind of a recap of all that's happened. The turbine had a problem in 2010. They fixed it, put it all back together in 2011, tried to start it up. The penstock started acting funny. And one thing you don't want in a hydro project is one of these huge metal penstocks coming loose. It has happened before, but it's like a fire hose. It just starts sweeping across the landscape. So they shut it off very quickly. Both units were taken offline. And hopefully this part of the project will be decommissioned and the canals will be repurposed to something other than water transport. Next slide. So I'm going to talk a little bit about temperature here. And this is something that I just can't believe people didn't pay as much attention to this study as I have. But of course, I was somewhat instrumental in getting this study done. But a team from UC Davis and the Stockholm Institute came up here, measured all the water temperatures, took all the information from PG&E and every other source they could, and they modeled different climate change scenarios. You know, worst case, middle case, and best case scenario. In even the best case scenario, it says the most important conclusion of this work is that the long-term survival of spring run Chinook salmon in Butte Creek is unlikely in the face of climate change, and that simple changes to water operations are not likely to dramatically change the vulnerability to extinction. Next slide. So this is one of the years where we had a bit of a temperature problem, 2003. And in July, when we were having some pretty hot weather, we had 17,000 fish in the creek that year. This is what the pool behind my house looked like. There's probably 300 to 400 fish in that school. A month later, next slide, after that heat spell and the serious die-off, this is what it looked like. Carcasses scattered all over the place, and this is what's left of the fish after that heat episode. And I'll leave it at that. But bottom line is that these fish have been through this before. They bounce back most of the time, but the problem is the frequency of this is likely to get greater, and the chances of them making it through these episodes, especially after what we saw in 2021, is getting less and less likely. Next slide. So when I first saw this picture, I thought, God, who photoshopped that picture? Because I just couldn't believe that Butte Creek could ever look that color. It's actually, you know, a beautiful contrast to the green plants there. And, you know, if it were the Ganges or, you know, someplace in Pakistan, you know, people would probably think that's normal, but not on Butte Creek. Next slide. So you saw the air photos there. I wanted to put some stills up here so you could focus a little bit more on what this landslide looks like now. That's approximately 1,500 yards of material, somewhere around 1.5 to 2 million pounds of material. And that's just what's left. There's an awful lot of that stuff that came downstream and is spread throughout our watershed here. So probably something on the order of 5 million pounds of material came down that hillside. And we still have over 1 million pounds sitting up there waiting for the next big rain. And I wanted to point out that although the creek is looking pretty good downstream here, this is what it looks like. This was last Saturday. This is right below the slide. And you can see that this is still picking up a lot of material off of that lower part of that bar there. So it's going to be a problem for quite some time. Next slide. Oh, go back if you wouldn't mind. I just wanted to point out that this silt in here was something that kind of caught everybody's eye when they first saw it. And what you may have noticed in that overhead video is that silt extends probably 100 yards or more upstream. And the only way that could have happened was for this to have blocked the creek completely, built up a little lake behind it that was full of sediment. That sediment was settling out on the bottom, and then finally it broke and everything washed downstream. But it left all that evidence behind of what actually happened up there. Next slide. Downstream in the Helltown area, this is what the rocks look like. This is one of our favorite sitting rocks down at one of the swimming holes here. You can see right at the water line, the brown silt starts. This is in between the rocks along the bank, and one of the few dead creatures that I found, but clearly that's not good habitat for crawdads. Next slide. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what sediment does for salmon. None of it is good, but immediately they start responding by excessively opening and closing their gills, like you would do if you were stuck in a building that was full of smoke. You're trying to get oxygen into your lungs. So that in itself is an extraordinary expenditure of energy. And all of a sudden, these fish that have been in the canyon without food for 6 months are having to deal with this. They've got a month till they spawn. They're losing energy. This is not the kind of thing you want to happen to those fish. Beyond that, sediment deposits account for the greatest mortality of salmon eggs. Sediment can reduce the hyporheic upwelling of water coming out of the gravels, which help oxygenate the redds where the eggs are laid. If that hyporheic flow isn't happening, the eggs can suffocate. Sediment can fill in all of those spaces in between. And that's one of the big problems we're worried about, is if there are survivors, and we have heard that there are some live fish up there, when they spawn, every single rainstorm is going to bring down more and more sediment. So they could lay their eggs, a week later a storm comes in and covers them up. Salmon gills are very delicate and easily affected by excess sediment, and turbid water induces a stress response in salmonids and can lead to compromised immune systems and reduced osmoregulatory competence. I'm not a fish biologist, and those terms are all new to me, but I understand very clearly what it means. This is not good for fish. Next slide. When PG&E decided to sell this project in 2017, myself and some other NGOs and agency folks formed what we called the Centerville Schoolhouse Work Group. And ironically, this is where we had our first meeting. Makes sense, doesn't it? So this is one of the products we came up with. We wanted to make a graphic where everybody could see all of the little details, all the little side creeks that go into the flume or go into the creek, depending on whether PG&E has water rights or not. In fact, I think these numbers over here are the water rights that PG&E has to all of these little tributaries. So once again, the reservoirs over on the West Branch, Hendricks Head Dam, Toadtown, Butte Canal, Butte Head Dam, on down. Existing conditions. Okay, next slide. What we came up with was what we called the proposed future conditions. And we looked at how this whole thing works. We looked at the economics of it, and everybody knows that the economics are not good. And we decided that Centerville is just absolutely worthless. It needs to go. So all these pink lines are things that we would like to see go away or be repurposed. So there's the Centerville part. Here's the Butte Canal part. This canal may be out of commission already. Bottom line is that if you take these canals out, take these 2 head dams out, all of a sudden there are no more dams on Butte Creek. And this isn't the Klamath, but good grief, folks, dam removal is the hot item here. And we can do this, and we can get fish back up here. I think we're going on to the next slide now. So I have this tunnel vision, and it's not the bad kind of tunnel vision. In a way, it's very focused, but what I've done is looked at how we might reoperate this project. And my vision is to reoperate this project where we still bring all of that beneficial water over from the West Branch of the Feather River, because it means a lot to the fish, and it means a lot to the agricultural and the refuge users downstream who divert it down at the Parrot Vale and Diversion. So we all agree we want to keep that water coming. The real question is, how do we want to bring it over here? So if we don't have the Butte Canal, we don't have the Centerville Canal, all that's left is this Hendricks Toadtown Canal coming across the ridge. And believe me, it's not in great shape either. It's had its share of failures, but it's even more critical to the fish, because if it fails at the wrong time in June or July, and all of a sudden that water is no longer available for the fish, we're in real serious trouble. So my idea is to get rid of that flume altogether, go up here to the Hendricks Head Dam, and either buy or rent a 6-foot diameter boring machine and bore either a 4.5 mile tunnel over here to Butte Head Dam or a 3.5 mile tunnel over to Clear Creek, or maybe even both. Well, you've got the machine, you might as well just tunnel all over the place. Bring all the water that normally comes over to Butte Creek. In fact, even more than's coming over now, because PG&E has water rights to 125 CFS. The canal doesn't do very well at that high volume. It's likely to fail, so they keep the volume down. This way we can bring all the water all the time through a tunnel where it'll stay cold. And actually, some studies have shown that the water coming out of the tunnel is colder than the water going in. So this is the best of all worlds for getting the water over, getting it over in the kind of condition we really want it to, and all the better we bring it in way upstream here, and all of a sudden we've got 150 CFS of water flowing down there in the middle of summer. Perfect habitat for spring run salmon and steelhead. Next slide. So that's pretty much the end of my presentation. I did want to show this famous picture by John Sherman of the 2021 run before the temperature got to him. And this is Quartz Bowl, famous Quartz Bowl. And a lot of people have looked at this and said, well, fish can't get over that. Well, actually they do get over this, but they just can't get over Centerville Head Dam. And there's no place like the Quartz Bowl upstream of that. So they come back down and they stay here all summer. So anyway, here's the 21,580 that came back. 19,773 died before spawning. And like that climate change study said, there's very little we can do to tweak the water temperature to accommodate this kind of situation. Next slide. So this is the end of the presentation. I've got one more slide here with the actions that we are asking people to take right now. So next slide. And that is, let's let FERC know that we're tired of waiting around to find out what's going to happen to this project. They need to get the ball rolling. They need to get the agencies rolling and come up with some workable plans to fix this project. And when I say fix it, I say turn it into a fisheries restoration project. Forget the hydroelectricity. It loses money. No matter how hard you try, this project will never make money. And it's in the ratepayers' interest to not have losing assets like that. So if we can take out the hydroelectric part, guess what? A whole bunch of power lines can come out. We've got 10 miles of high voltage power lines going right up the middle of the canyon. PG&E, of course, clear cuts underneath those things. So we've got this swath all the way up the canyon. And as good a job as they do clearing, and maybe too good in a lot of people's sentiments, that can all go away. We can let the forest grow back. But even the way it is right now, if one of those power lines comes down, it's going to start a fire. And the last thing we need is a fire starting right here in the canyon and destroying the rest of this habitat that we have here. From here on down, got burned by the campfire. From here on up, all good. So we can get rid of all that stuff and have a fisheries project here that everybody in the nation will look to. Next slide. So by the way, join our mailing list, donate if you can, and join us for our Wild and Scenic Film Festival, which is the next slide. This is what we do every year to raise money. This is happening October 6th at the Art Pavilion on Park Avenue. We have a wonderful selection of films. They're all environmentally related, socially related to the environment. Really a fun time. We've been doing it for 17 years, which I can hardly believe, but everybody keeps saying, come on, keep it going, keep it going. So please join us. There are flyers being handed out for the Take Action part and for the film festival. We hope you'll join us. Thank you so much. Can we just put them on the table outside so people can pick them up? So somebody printed up some of these letters for us. So if you want to take one that's already ready to go, it'll be out there on the table out there. So we're going to have I think PGD wanted to say a few words, and, okay. That's a good point. I did mention the Forks of the Butte project. That project was built in the late 80s. It consists of a similar dam, much smaller than either of the Centerville or Butte Head Dam. It's got a fish ladder on it, which was required when they built it. And it's got a good minimum in-stream flow over that dam to keep the fisheries alive in there. The interesting thing about that dam is that it's got this beautiful fish screen, one of the nicest fish screens I've ever seen. But underneath that fish screen is a tunnel that goes down 500 feet straight down. That's how they tunneled that project. When they got down there, somehow they turned and went horizontally down to the Forks of the Butte powerhouse, a total of 11 miles of tunnel. And I think it's somewhere around 12 feet in diameter. And it can carry up to 250 cubic feet per second. So it's not like these things are far-fetched. We have one right here in our watershed already. Thanks. Okay, question, PGD. You want to say a word? Okay.
Here's our mic.
Hi, folks. I'm Mike Ramsey. And so within 24 hours of the blowout up there, we were hearing from you as to the Orange Butte Canal blowout that caused, obviously, Butte Creek to turn awful. So I sent investigators up, my investigators, DA investigators, experienced with PG&E. PG&E folks are here. I told them, they are my favorite punching bag since even before the campfire. But the campfire was the largest corporate criminal conviction for manslaughter in the history of the United States. So PG&E and I have a relationship that when they heard me call and said, "You did it again," they were less than happy, let's say, to hear from me. But one of the things that came back, and it's, out of fairness, one of the things that came back from my investigators that went up, they were watching what was going on the ground with the PG&E folks, with the agency biologist, FERC, NOAA, our own Fish and Game folks that took the lead, the state, I will always call it Fish and Game. The state a few years ago called it, changed its name to California Fish and Wildlife. My father was a game warden in this area for 25 years. So it's always Fish and Game to me. I say Fish and Wildlife, he turns in his grave. So what those investigators came and said, the folks on the ground, including the PG&E folks, are just apoplectic. This is not the corporate, giant, unfeeling, rotten SOB, but the people on the ground are extraordinarily concerned. They are working together. They're trying to figure out what is happening, what happened, and more importantly, how to fix it immediately. Get it done. Get that sediment pile out of there and start, and they've already started the studies on what to do. But holding, and many of you that have emailed me, how to hold PG&E accountable, how to fund a pipe dream, as Alan and I have talked about. That may be a lawsuit that is brought by the district attorney. I have brought a similar lawsuit against DWR for the Orville Dam spillway failure. Alan talked about all of the dirt that went into Butte Creek. Well, there was a lot of dirt that went into the Feather River and smothered something in the neighborhood of 3 million salmon smolt down in the hatchery. And under Fish and Game Code Section 5650, there is a provision that those who do such things, that dump deleterious material, normally you wouldn't think of dirt as deleterious material, but when it comes in tonnage, then it is, that it is up to $10 per pound. Example, with the lawsuit that we are doing with DWR, the estimate was that DWR on the spillway fracture and spill was 1.7 million cubic yards of material into the Feather River. You go to an expert that will say how much poundage is in a cubic yard. So I consulted with the expert named Google, and he said about 3,000 pounds per cubic yard. Added it up, and DWR got a demand from the Butte County District Attorney of a penalty of $52 billion. That is still working its way through our court systems from 2017. So it's not a sprint here. It's a slog. Ellen is used to slogging. But that is one of the kind of the tools in our bag to keep, make accountability for PG&E. But I asked PG&E to be here, not to be punching bags, obviously, but to explain what they're doing right now, what they saw on the ground, what they believe has happened, and what their plan forward and kind of the emergency plans forward are. And I'd like to kind of introduce them, and then later, well, in the back, we have Barry Chacon, who is the lieutenant in charge of this area for Fish and Game, the lieutenant in charge of the environmental section and leading this particular California Fish and Game effort. Couldn't be here tonight, so Barry's stepping in for her. But I wanted to kind of assure all of you that you've been heard, and there will be accountability. There can't not be accountability, but we need to know how we're moving forward. And I'd ask, and I'm going to introduce here, this is, which of you first? Janet? Okay, this is Janet Walther. She's senior manager in the hydro licensing and compliance. And following her is Sam Garcia, who is the incident commander for the Butte Canal breach. He's a senior manager, environmental management. He's a professional wetland scientist and generation facilities and projects. These are the boots on the ground. These are the local folks that are just as horrified as to what has been happening, and will be witness 1 and 2 in depositions, but you know.
Good evening, everyone. We'll keep this short and then open it up to Q&A. I know you've gone a great presentation so far, and many of the items we were going to cover has already been covered, and a great job. Just want to share from PG&E, one, we appreciate the being here. We're here to answer your questions. We have the same concerns. We're very concerned about the salmon. We have our teams out there every day working. We're bringing on more teams to do continued monitoring. And it's not just this year we're worried about the salmon. We work out here every single year with the salmon. And we're very concerned about the canal failure. Sam will talk a little bit more about that and our response. We're also monitoring the foothill yellow-legged frog that are in the area as well. So we are taking this very serious. We always do. We are part of the community. I don't live in Chico anymore, but I did for 35, 40 years. I spent a lot of time up here. I miss it, but I've been back the last couple weeks. And with that, I'm going to really keep it that brief. I'm going to turn it over to Sam, but again, we'll be here to answer questions in the Q&A and or afterwards. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Sam Garcia. First off, uh, personally, I'm truly inspired and impressed by your guys' organization here as a community. I say that honestly. Uh, I am the incident commander for our emergency management team that was established at the onset of the incident. I'm a biologist and a wetland ecologist. I happen to be in a position where I saw an opportunity to make sure we're doing the right thing as quickly as possible. So my initial goals in setting up the incident command was, one, stop the flow of water out of the canal. That happened very quickly. The team that we have established on site, you heard reference to them early, they all live here. They're all part of the community. They love this creek like everybody else does. The second thing, I wanted to make sure everybody was safe. The public, our employees that we're deploying out to this site, that they were going to be safe, and we're trying to respond immediately to take care of the situation that was emerging fast. There was a slope failure below the canal, extremely concerning to me. And then a debris pile into the creek. And for me, as a wetland ecologist, it was like, we got to get this, something's got to be happening soon. What is happening to the environment here, to the fish and wildlife, to your community? I quickly set up a command structure and started organizing the team based on the objectives of stopping the water, fixing the canal, making sure everything is safe, studying and monitoring the fish, and getting a better picture of what's actually happening from an impact perspective. And we're still doing that every day. The immediate emergency stuff, we've got pretty good. We stopped the water, right? The canal's fixed, but it's still not returned to service. It's really important to me that as I'm slowing down my emergency response, because we've finished some of our objectives, that when I let this go to project planning, that I feel trust that people are going to carry forth the right way. So I'm promising to stay involved as long as I can. I just tell you, we're working really hard, and we're working every day, long hours, to make sure we're on top of everything that needs to be on top of. We're working tirelessly with our partners, with the agencies, with our scientist partners, with Department of Fish and Wildlife. I tend to say Fish and Game all the time as well. NOAA Fisheries. We have a very large science team at PG&E that really focuses on this watershed, this creek, these fish, that care for those fish, that treat them as, they think of them as their babies because they're sending water down. So anyways, I'll cut this short. I tell you, I'm just as concerned as everybody else. I appreciate the looks on all of your faces while I'm standing up here. I really do. So that's it. I'm ready for questions when you are.
So thank you, P&E, for showing up. I really appreciate that. And it's good to hear that everyone cares about this. We have only, looks like 6 people are signed up. So Vanessa, again, we're going to keep it brief. And if you want to sign up on this list, you're welcome to. Do you want to come to the front, or you want to speak from there? Okay.
You can't hear me? Outside. Okay, oh, sorry. So I'm like, did our Teeter leave? Because I think he can maybe answer this question, right? Isn't, you're our guy, right? What happened with? Well,
So,
you're representing me.
are you done? I don't want to cut you off.
No, I'm asking you because I saw you here today.
Well,
What
I
happened,
wanna-
what happened to our road
I
that got
wanna
funding?
defer to the organizers because I don't want to jump in and turn it into Doug Teeter's town hall.
No, I just want to, because
So-
once I heard how that road affects the creek, I mean, that was a lot of
Ma'am,
information. for me.
Ma'am, the outside can't hear, so if you got more to say, that's all right. I was trying to help the outside. Doug Teeter, Butte County Supervisor, been doing this job for 11 years. Hard to believe. We've had a lot of challenges in Butte Creek, and I hope you feel that I'm here to try to help. And, someone did say, oh, you got to do. Well, unfortunately, I got 4 other supervisors that have other areas that have a lot of, challenges as well. And so here's my proposal is I wasn't fully aware that this was going to be a town hall on the roads. I would like a town hall where I can have Public Works, the director, be here. I'd also like to have Louis Mendoza, who's the ag commissioner, who can discuss about pesticide use or herbicide use, not pesticides. And also code enforcement, because the roadside maintenance in a lot of these rural communities is really private property. And so I think all that information would be better and coming from staff as well than just, I mean, I could go on for an hour on those subjects, but I think let's get the experts here and do it right. So. Yeah. Well, you could call it a hearing, you could call it a town hall. It's whatever you want. So I'll work with whomever. And I think maybe one of these. So yeah, let's do it.
That sounds good, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Vanessa. I left the clipboard right here. Oh, yeah.
Teeter, thank you for answering, and we didn't mean to put you on the spot for that, but the point of bringing it up to you, and especially because when we knew you were coming, is that you need to be the voice of the canyon. Like we're a sacred little spot up here and we're not getting heard, and you're our representative. And so the point of bringing it up tonight is for you to go back and present it, whether you need to shoot us something saying, hey, it's on the agenda, come give your point. But that's really what we need from you is to bring it up to the others.
Let us know when and where.
Yeah.
We'll be there.
I'm gonna work with one of you or 2 of you or all of you to get a town hall here that's convenient, so you guys can hear the story from other people that are experts. That's what it proposed.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's work cooperatively. I love that. Les Herringer? Les Herringer, please speak in the mic. Thank you.
Real quick,
Thank you.
for everybody that wants to attend that other town hall, please sign up for our email list.
Yeah, my name's Les Herringer. I manage the M&T Ranch. We're out west of Chico. We have the diversion, it's called Okie Dam. It's the first diversion you come to on Butte Creek. And I really want to thank PG&E for everything you've done to help the salmon. Without your cool water coming over, during a dry to normal year, those salmon would have a lot tougher time in that hot water. And I know that PG&E works closely with California Department of Fish and Wildlife during heat storms. They bring water over from Philbrook and from Round Valley during heat storms. They bring extra water in to help the salmon through the summer. Especially in July and August when the sun is straight overhead and the creek, the water gets the full impact of the sun. You get later in the fall and there's a lot more shading. But without PG&E's work there, and I can't imagine, I'm a property manager, okay? And stuff happens. It really does, when you're managing property. I've had stuff go on Butte Creek, Remember in '96, the creek cut a new channel around our facility there, and it took us about a year and a half. We'd already put in a nice fish ladder, fish screens. It took about a year to put everything back together. Like I said, stuff happens, especially when you're dealing with water. I'm happy to be here. I'll answer any questions you have. A lot of that water that PG&E brings over in 1996, 97, we entered into an agreement with California Department of Fish and Wildlife to leave 42nd feet of that water in the creek for the benefit of the spring run salmon. So, you know, we're helping out, and we work very closely with California Department of Fish and Wildlife. There's a hole down by the Highway 99 bridge during real dry years. The salmon hang out there because there's a formation right behind Knife River called the Lahar Formation. It's a big rock right in the middle of the creek, and the fish can't get over it. And I've worked with Fish and Wildlife letting extra water go just to help the salmon over that Lahar Formation, which has not proved very successful. So right now there's a study going on how to make that Lahar Formation more easily accessible for the spring run salmon when they're making their journey upstream. But there's 26 miles, and you've seen some of the pictures here tonight of flumes, of tunnels, of canals that are, you know, well over 100 years old. The gold miners made this system initially to mine gold in Butte Creek. I can't imagine what it takes expense-wise. I mean, that's why PG&E said, you know, Uncle, we can't do this. 2 more minutes? Oh, okay. Well, anyway, thank you for your time here. I've enjoyed this meeting, and it sounds like there's a lot of productive, proactive things happening here. Thank you again. Yeah. Okay. You're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, 2 minutes, please. We'll keep time over here. Paul Baker, are you still here? Paul Baker is signed up, and Nolan Levine. Thanks, Nolan. And oh, here's Paul. Okay. Nolan, you're next. And then I heard there are some more people, so I'm going to bring this outside. Paul, thank you so much. 2 minutes. Here you go, Paul. Thank you so much.
I don't know what that is.
It's a mic, and we want you to use it so it's on the recording.
Okay.
Thank you. You could put it on your ears.
I know it's probably COVID correct or
Oh.
I don't know how to use this stuff. I'm too old.
You can hold it, or you can do it like
How about if you drape me?
I'll drape
They can hear me.
you. There you are.
And I thank you. I've been noting that at my 25 acres at 0 Rich Bar Road that got burned in the fire, before I even had any inkling of building anything on it, there's a sandstone cliff that lost a 60-foot oak tree, and it dropped off a 60-foot sandstone cliff into the creek, where Butte Creek right below here makes a right-hand turn. And I'm going, there's neighbors' debris left purposely on the beaches prior to expected flooding. Snags on my root ball I've been trying to clear with my own money, with friends, for water recreation safety. And I'm just saying, okay, stop with that. Now back to the main degree of Butte Creek. Do you have any Grand Poupon? Looks like a mustard fest. The first mustard I was buying was like porter mustard from Ken Grossman. And I don't agree with their little bring retard to work and use it as an excuse to mess up our aquifers. They've been doing it, and they'll continue to do it until we stop them. That's all I gotta say, and I will give you an extra 20 seconds to just think about it. I was trying to get here earlier, and I was still working at my 25. Thank you very much for being you.
Nolan?
What? I know, the long hair is not necessary.
Here you go. You can hold it.
Hello? Jeez. Hi. I have a question for PG&E. I'm just curious as to why you guys didn't make a public announcement when this happened. If you guys care as much as you say you do, how come you didn't announce that this was happening? It's unsafe for swimming, possibly. Maybe test the water. Let the public know. There was zero transparency. My neighbor, he's an elderly man. He exercises in the water. He swims for 30 minutes in the current to exercise himself. He said 10 minutes before this came down, he got out of the water, luckily. If he hadn't gone out of the water, he could have been seriously injured. We don't know. It caused a flux of flow. So I just want to know why there wasn't a public announcement made for the people of Chico and the canyon.
I would just like to say that we do work through, Office of Emergency Services, the media, and we do try to communicate. We don't ourselves have a way to make that public announcement. So we did work through our regulatory agencies again, and OES and others. And Sam might have more to add, but I think it's good feedback for us to take. And in the future, is there something that we can do differently and better? Maybe we didn't do well in communicating with this local community here. So we did followed our processes, but again, I think it's something that we should take back and look at. Maybe we can do better. Hopefully, we do not have a next time on this situation, but learn for another situation.
Roger?
What am I doing? Talking to that? Okay, I can do that. Thanks. Hi, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Roger Cole, former chairman of Stream Minders, and we did stream restoration projects in the city of Chico on Bidwell Ave and along Big Chico Creek, and overall got about $2 million in grants in 20 years. And so I've looked into this watershed stuff. I've even consulted with Alan on fishery things regarding the existing conditions report. Anyway, so just a few seconds on my take at the first blush of what I see is, number one, PG&E obviously needs to increase their monitoring of the canal an order of magnitude. They know that. We all know that now, right? Secondarily, I think a big focus should be, can we remove the sediment from the stream and dispose of it in a site probably nearby in some way to get it out of the creek before the rains come? And with the deadline being, the first big storm. If a willing landowner could be found not too far away to take the soil, it might very well be feasible. I'm not saying it's easy. It's going to be incredibly complicated and difficult, but I think it can be done. And then lastly, I just want to say, let's find a way to implement Alan's plan for the watershed.
And Greg Gollet?
Hi, I just have a couple questions. So the canal is in poor shape, as people have said, and it's undermined in a lot of different places. And I understand that there's some monitoring that takes place of, I believe, the water level in the creek. There's propane tanks at different locations, and my understanding is those are used to give PG&E some notice when the the water level drops suddenly. But I haven't been able to find out anything more about that. So I'd like to know how it is that you go about monitoring the creek, what type of information you have. And in this particular instance, when did you receive news? How long did it take to shut down the flow into the canal? Is that something that you have capacity to do remotely? Because undoubtedly it's going to fail again, and it's like such a maze of flumes, and it's in poor condition. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks for the question. I presume the monitoring you're asking about is more related to water levels and fluctuation and not necessarily the quality of the water that's in the creek. It's under active investigation right now, why and how this happened. We did notice the breach early that morning on Thursday morning, and at that point, immediate action was taken right when that happened. Other than that, we really are under active investigation. There's a lot of eyes on that to find out what happened and how we can better monitor it. That's really all I have for you. You know, really my involvement has been at the response level right when we found out that there was a breach that occurred, and for me to speak to previous to that, I'm really not privy or able to do that, and I apologize. That's right. So within hours, when we were aware of the breach, within hours, we shut flood side gates upstream and diverted water out of the breach to prevent it from ongoing down the hill. That was fairly quick that we made that after we discovered the breach. We did leave about 10 CFS in the canal to manage for fish and put a patch in there to make sure no more water was going down the slope. But yeah, that's how fast it happened that morning.
What time did you get on board that day?
I got a call later that afternoon or midday to start that this had happened.
So like 1 o'clock?
Yeah, about 1 o'clock, and then agency notification. As soon as we knew there was turbidity in the water, we made agency notices of the release.
To answer the specific question, we do have automation. It was really when our crews went in the morning and they read the automation, and immediately from that, realizing that the canal elevation was not correct, opened the side gate. There is automation separately. You know, at some time we'll let you talk to ops folks or something to understand a little bit more about the automation. But we do have that automation, and it's remote operated from Rock Creek Cresta, powerhouse on the Feather.
Thank you. Kara? Oh, okay.
I just wanted to add that these are what are called shotgun gates. I think they're still called shotgun gates, and there are a number of them along that flume there. And generally, when something like this happens, they are radio controlled, as he said, from Rock Creek, and they immediately fire off all these shotgun gates. They open all the gates, and the water in the canal is dumped down the hillsides and back into the creek. Not a real clean operation, but it's a lot better than the water continuing on down the canal and continuing the erosion that it was doing. So it is a good system. It's not perfect.
Thank you. Kara?
I just have a comment. I don't know if people are aware of it, but there's a United States Geological Station just below the Honeybank Bridge site. If you look right after this incident, like the next day, there were actual fluctuations on the creek level that they're describing. It would be probably quite a few hours or maybe a day or two before that water from the breach actually got down to there. But just so, you know, if somebody wants to see what happened to the water flow, that's a computerized record, and you can go back and look at that exact date and it's basically monitored every 15 minutes. So it's a real-time CFS near Butte Creek is all you have to type into your Google search.
So I see you want to ask a question. We're going to wrap this up. So Kara? Okay.
So we've talked about how the canals are old, 100-year-old ones. What are we doing to make sure that this doesn't happen again? My question is to PG&E. Are you guys doing more monitoring? Like what exactly is going on to ensure this doesn't happen again?
There is not water in the canal again. It hasn't been returned to service as of yet. The canal's being inspected. There's an intensive investigation on the canal right now, and there's lots of eyes walking those canals to understand, try to figure out what happened.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say that I, for one, am personally not interested in thanking PG&E for releasing water when they were the ones who were damming it up in the first place. And it seems to me like we're talking about a lot of direct action here. And I think the most important direct action that you guys could really help us with is taking down these dams and supporting us in our plan to release the water back to the salmon, because they have more rights to it than anybody else does.
Oh, we have so many people want to. All right, we're.
1 minute. Hi, everybody. I just want to say I'm really impressed that we had such a big turnout. As far as the PG&E representatives coming here and talking to us about this issue, I don't doubt that you all care about the salmon and the state of our creeks. However, you two are not the ones responsible, and that's the issue with giant corporations that are controlling all of our resources and making profits off of them. So how are we going to prevent this from happening in the future? I'd say that that's a way bigger question. And just before this happened, all of our local news agencies were reporting on record-breaking profits for PG&E. And that's something that we haven't really talked about this evening. So I just want to say that's something that's on my mind, is the fact that PG&E is a giant mega corporation that is controlling our resources. Thank you.
Yeah, and we all realize this, but we're grateful that you've shown up, and we know you care, and we also want a better world, really, right? Thank you all so much. I think Kara has she has one more question, and then Jared's gonna give a closing statement for us, and we're gonna close this meeting. That doesn't mean we need to run out. You're welcome to talk, communicate, write down questions, sign up. Sign the petition. I don't know where it stopped, but there's a petition, and it sounds like we don't really need that because Teeter has just offered us a town hall. But if you get on our email list, you'll know when that's happening, and we'd love to have it happen sooner than later. We know momentum is a real thing. Thank you all so much. This has been really fulfilling to know that so many of you care and that you're willing to stand up and to take an action. It means so much. I'm gonna let Kara give her question, and then Jared.
As I understand it, and from what I've heard, this entire canal project was for sale. Is that correct? Is this entire project for sale? Does PG&E want ownership over it, or would they like it to change hands?
PG&E did actually put the project on the market. We did try to sell it. We were unsuccessful in reaching an agreement with the potential buyer. We negotiated for many years. At that time, we closed that deal, and then we determined at that time we were going to move forward with our existing relicensing process, which has been a long time, Alan. So we notified FERC that we were no longer going to divest of the project, and we were going to move forward with the relicensing and continue to own and operate it. We are waiting for FERC to, it's kind of FERC that takes the next steps in the initiation of the relicensing. Much of it has been done. We're still waiting for our biological opinion from NIMS is one of the last remaining stages in that relicensing process. But at this point, our intent is to plan to own and operate the project.
Sounds like we all need to contact FERC. Just going to throw that one out there. Last question for Mr. Ramsey. I just want to clarify that PG&E is going to be facing litigation for this event. Is that correct?
Well, PG&E always faces litigation, as you well know. So, investigation. Investigation is not an overnight thing, as you've asked. Some of the questions you've asked are being investigated not only by PG&E, but by the law enforcement agencies. There's some concern that there were alarms that were set off prior to the discovery of the breach. Perhaps the breach could have been the water out of the canal sooner. Those are various issues. But in terms of what we were talking about, in terms of litigation, as we'll call a civil prosecution, those fish and game codes that we were talking about, these are what we call strict liability codes. And so PG&E is obviously responsible. PG&E is obviously going to have to pay for reparations, in other words, to clear it out. And then it's whether in good faith, PG&E then says, you know, we are going to revamp this completely and make sure it never happens again. We're going to patch it a little bit. Then perhaps a injunction that makes sure that they do that is in the offing. That's down the roads, folks. But we are experienced, when I say we, the district attorney's office, the local district attorney's office is very adept at that type of environmental prosecution. And so they'll be watched, and if appropriate, it will happen.
Very lastly, sorry, I know I said my last question was the last one. I just want to put Alan on the mic one more time. And is there anything that we as a community can do, take steps forward, ways we can be in contact for this tunnel vision project? Because I'm so excited about this concept of this tunnels project that Alan has suggested is really tangible, it's doable, it's cost effective, it's low maintenance. So I think we as a community really need to pursue this idea. It's not going to do itself. This is a really big project that would need to be undertaken. Just because the creek looks a little bit better today does not mean this issue is over, does not mean we need to stop being active. This is a really, really good idea that Alan has presented, in my opinion. So let's all stay in contact. And Alan, do you have any further words for us on that?
Well, I'd just like to say that NOAA Fisheries has a grant program coming up. It's focused on fish passage. The same program awarded Big Chico Creek $9 million to improve fish passage through Iron Canyon. We will be applying to that. We're going to work with the Mechoopda. We're going to work with other partners, and hopefully we'll get some funding to move forward with some studies that can help us achieve those goals. So.
Solutions.
I don't think I'll put that on my head. So I have a couple questions. So let me just go back to the day that I went up to the site and we ran into your guys' recon team, which they're very concerned, which made me feel a lot better. So you had a biologist there and you had some other people that know these things and the long-term effects. We all know a lot more than we did earlier, correct? I mean, we got pretty educated today. I feel good about it. I learned a lot. So I want to know what you guys are going to do to get complete transparency. What are you going to help us with to have transparency? And what does that look like moving forward? Because investigation, we all know, we've heard that, and that's just this typical, let's tell the public we're investigating this. But at the end of the day, what's the transparency of moving forward? How do you want to offer us a vision of what's actually happening? What's their long-term goals? What's your oversight? And how are you going to address maintenance if that canal goes back on? How are you going to prevent this from happening again? Because at the end of the day, like the older gentleman said, mistakes happen, shit happens. Excuse my French. But at the end of the day, what are we going to do to prevent this? What's our long-term goals? You know, how are we going to work with Alan, the tribe? What's your transparency? Do you guys have any of that for us right now?
Yeah, I could speak to that from an ecological and resource perspective. We do actively partner with the resource agencies, particularly on this incident. I spoke to some members earlier today to make sure the Mechoopda were a part of those discussions as well, and I'd like to talk to you afterwards if you had a moment. But those are ongoing conversations that we have with those agencies, and if we need to do regular report outs or somehow engage the community so you understand what's happening, what the plan is, it's public information when we're doing those, so it's not like there's anything being brought back. So you know, we could touch base offline. I'll leave you my name and number, and we can figure out how we can do some community updates on what our long-term plan is, what the short-term plan is, and what the long-term plan is for the creek.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Because honestly, nobody here even knew that the canal was off still or on still, because the recon team's main objective was to make a long-term plan of getting that material out. They're literally talking about doing it with a shovel. Makes no sense. But also the long-term plan is moving forward. How do I say this? What do we need on our end to make sure that we can have full transparency from you guys? Do we have to create an organization, a group? We got Friends of Butte Creek. We want to work directly with you for the long term, for the health of the canyon and the future, because what's important here is leaving what was given to us for free for the future generations, because that's who's going to step it up. That's why I wanted as many kids here today, because it's about them. What's that? I just want to thank everybody for coming. This means a lot to me and everybody that was involved. I want to thank everybody that participated and put in all this hard work. And I hope everybody has a lot more transparency moving forward, and they feel like they actually know what happened and what some of the long-term directions that we're going to go. And the most important part is now is sign up, give us your email, tell us your questions so we can go through everything on all the different agendas as far as the creek, far as the road, far as the spraying, and any other thing that you see in the canyon that's been rubbing you the wrong way, something that you know that is important, that's for the long-term health of our community, our environment, our fish, and our future generations. Thank you very much.
And I just want to give a big thank you to Andrew Burke, who we just pulled in as the audiovisual guy, and there's hours and hours that he's put in. Like, thank you. Thank you to everyone. And we'll do this again. So please stay in touch. Thank you.